Welcome to the Wayfinder Psychedelic Podcast, a space for seekers, healers, coaches, and curious souls navigating the inner terrain of transformation. I'm Joy Whitmore.
And I'm Samantha McClanahan. Together, we explore the intersection of wayfinding wisdom, psychedelic healing, and the magic that unfolds when we slow down and listen deeply to ourselves, to the medicine, and to one another. This podcast is part story sharing, part soul inquiry, part practical toolkit, all rooted in reverence for the feminine path of transformation. Let's begin.
All right. Hello and welcome. So, I think this is kind of what we're going to call episode two of our official Wayfinder Psychedelic Collective podcast. And today it's important that we discuss preparation and integration. And we're going to get into the topic of what exactly is integration coaching. Who can do it? What is the role of a coach or a facilitator versus a therapist when it comes to integration? So, here's another little story from your pal Joy, but it was again the Wayfinder training program where I sat there in a moment of complete insight and downloads and messages from the universe. And I go, wait, there's so many friends that I have that were doing ayahuasca or mushrooms and having these incredible experiences, but like just then going home. And they would share their stories, but there was really no one to help them integrate what those insights mean. So this is where, when I was in master coach training, that it really solidified for me that, again, wayfinding coach model is just a really good way to support people who maybe went and did an experience out of the United States or in another country. And there just needs to be some way to support people in any context. So today we're going to talk about that. And also, as a former recreational user, I'm like 30 years later, still remembering experiences I had on psychedelics and still bringing pieces of integration into my life now. So, what I'd like to invite you to do for a moment is just if you're listening and you've had a journey before, I invite you to recall what happened during that journey. If you haven't had a psychedelic journey, doesn't mean you're excluded. I just invite you to think about a really great vacation that you had. And so just take yourself back to that journey or that vacation and think about something that came up that you haven't unpacked yet.
Mm.
And as I'm sharing this, I remember from my last journey, there's some stuff there that I've shared with friends and the members of the collective, and there's definitely some stuff still to unpack. So this is just an invitation to maybe find whatever you left in your suitcase on that journey or that vacation that you have yet to bring into the current present world.
Mm. Yeah, and I want to mention that it might not be something dark and heavy and difficult. You may have had a really lovely experience. Like from my last big journey, there were huge themes of unconditional love, and I will most definitely be integrating that into my life for the rest of my life. And, even if all you've had is just one big transformative experience, I can guarantee there's enough in there to work on for the rest of your life. So today we want to talk about a few different things, and we're going to start with the importance of integration. So, in the medicine state, we have an opportunity to come face to face with our patterns, our attachment wounds, our survival and avoidance behaviors. And this is a wonderful and necessary first step. And we are so, so grateful that the medicine shows us all of this. But that often puts us into what wayfinders would call square one of the change cycle. This is a place where we are usually pretty uncomfortable. We are aware that some changes need to be made, but we may have no idea where to begin or how to cope with the grief that we might feel after this veil has been lifted during a journey and we see just how far off track our lives have become. Psychedelic means mind manifesting. And it's often the case that when we return back to our everyday lives after the ceremony, we realize that our lives feel way out of alignment with who we really are. We are out of integrity. We are disintegrated. Some people even go on to live two separate lives. They still abide by all the expectations set upon them from their little microcultures of family, friend circles, maybe church or the wider community, etc. But they have a secret life in the world of psychedelics where they are able to be their full selves. I think that this is why some people chase peak experience after peak experience without doing any of the integration work. They don't have to take any action in their lives that would bring about transformation and new relationship dynamics. And we understand because that can be scary, making changes in your life, especially if you don't have proper support. But this leads to a duplicitous life. And I don't mean that that makes you a bad person in any way. It's just a way of saying that you have doubleness. You are double in thought, different, double in your words, double in your actions, and that these two ways of being are often in conflict with each other. And I just want to ask, what might that do to someone over time? What might that do to your mental and physical health, to your relationships with the people that you care about, and to your relationship to yourself? That's why it's so, so important to integrate the insights we receive from sacred psychedelic medicines. And I've got a little metaphor here for you. Integration oftentimes is, it's kind of treated like it's the icing on the cake. Go to go to Peru, go to Costa Rica, go have your medicine experience, go on your ayahuasca retreats, go to your ketamine clinic, and if you happen to get some integration, good for you. But that's the icing on the cake. And I want to take this metaphor further. Um, the integration is like, okay, so the medicine gives you a vision of a beautiful cake. Integration is coming back into your regular life, searching and finding the right recipe to make that beautiful cake. And then it's going to the store and buying the ingredients and following through with all the little steps to actually make the cake from your vision, icing and all.
And you just almost perfectly described the Wayfinder coaching model, which, you mentioned the icing on the cake. Often people think about coaching or therapy as what's going to be at the end, but they forget, like, what's actually the vision? What steps did you take to get there? What was the actual journey part, not just the destination? And so I'd love for you to go into how you feel the Wayfinder way really, really is the great integration model for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that the underlying philosophy of the Wayfinder coaching model is that people already have the wisdom within themselves. It's not up to us as coaches to tell people who they are and what they need to do. It's up to us to hold space, to be open and curious, to ask the right questions, to offer the right kind of support for people to connect to the wisdom within themselves and to come up with their own plan of action for how to bake their cake. Because it's not my cake, it's my client's cake. And we see in some other, popular integration models that it's really the opposite. It's the role of the facilitator. It's the role of the coach or the therapist to come up with the plan of action, to come up with an integrative framework and for the client to test it out and see what works and see if it feels like it's in alignment. And I would equate this to kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. And it honestly, it kind of speaks of hierarchy too. I'm up here as the coach and you're down there as the client, and I know what's best for you, and you just need to trust me. And that's not the Wayfinder way. And we have found the Wayfinder way to actually be extremely powerful because when the insights come from within, it's going to create more transformation than if they're just handed to you from outside. So, do you have anything else you would add to that, Joy?
Yeah, I mean, as a wayfinder, my question to you is, what would your experience have been like for initiation into this work? Had I been like, okay, Sam, once we're done, you're going to go journal for this many hours a day, and you're going to do this, this, and this. How would that have felt for your nervous system, for example?
Oh, my first reaction in my body, I'm just sensing in my body. The first reaction is yuck.
Hmm. Yeah.
And don't tell me what to do.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and that the word coach does get a bad rap because, when you think of coach, sometimes the first thing that people think of is, a school athletic coach or, football coach. And that is definitely a place where coaches are telling you what to do to be better or to improve or to fit in better with the team. And so this is important because this is not that kind of work when it comes to integration. And since I asked Sam about her nervous system, I think it's a good time to talk about a trauma informed approach. And I know the Wayfinder coaching model talks about trauma, identifying trauma. And the truth is, most clients carry some form of trauma, whether they know it or not, or whether they talk about it or not. And people seek coaching or therapy because they feel stuck. But often
Hmm.
beneath that stuckness, there's old stories formed earlier in life, reinforced over time, and stored in the body.
Hmm.
Psychedelic work, now in coaching one-on-one with no psychedelics involved, we know how to gently walk with clients through these stories. But when it comes to psychedelic work, that tends to amplify the unspoken. And the suppressed material and experiences and memories may surface quickly. And when it does, the container has to be strong enough to hold it.
Mm-hmm.
So, being really informed about where your clients are with trauma also plays into how you work with them, because there may be a client who's had some form of control or had a parent that was traumatizing them with forms of control. And so, for them, being told what to do doesn't work. So it's really important that we learn what trauma is, how to identify it. It does not mean that we, as coaches or facilitators, cannot work with these types of clients. What it does mean is that we understand deeply what they may need in addition to this work. And, knowing therapists that do this work in conjunction with coaches is a great thing.
Hmm.
Um, and I've had this happen before. I started working with a client. She was amazing. She had done the work, had been in therapy, and just about as we were about to microdose, some exile from an IFS work we were doing came up. And my nervous system, myself said, Joy, this is not for you to work with her on. And I had to do the tough work of telling her, this may actually bring up more of that stuff if you were to do a psychedelic journey a month from now when you're scheduled to. So that was a really good and hard challenge for me, that tuning into what my body was saying in response, and also knowing where that person may benefit from having a therapist work with them, especially when it comes to exile work. For me personally, I don't know. I know other coaches who do IFS with all types of parts, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to say, first of all, speaking of being in integrity, right? Because there was a part of you that was like, this doesn't feel right. If you had just moved forward, you would have been out of integrity. And so
Yeah.
that's so important when seeking any kind of support, whether it be coaching or therapy. Make sure you're working with someone who is trauma informed and somebody whose integrity is just like rock solid. Um, yeah, and we understand that this can be, as a facilitator, this can be really difficult to navigate, especially if you have a client who has trauma and they say, I came to you because you're not a therapist. I've been in therapy for years and I feel that it really doesn't help me, or it hasn't done much for me. And this is where it's so important, first of all, to understand that like the Western medicine model is not a villain, right? We are not against the Western model of medicine. It has its time and place, and it is extremely valuable. But not all therapists practice in the same way. Not all of them have, the same guiding principles. And this is why it's so important for us to be collaborating and forming, cooperative networks where we can refer clients to really fantastic therapists, and therapists feel free to refer their clients to really great facilitators and coaches.
Yeah, and so this raises an interesting question. What is the difference between coaching and facilitation? I mean, for me, as I started off with this podcast, I came to this work as a coach. But as I started doing the work, I thought, ooh, I want to dip my toes into facilitation. So, what do you want to share about what your idea of the difference between a psychedelic coach, a guide, and a facilitator is?
Ooh, mm. Well, as a wayfinder, I would say I would say to coaches who are interested in doing this work that you need to connect deeply to your essential self and your inner knowing. And if facilitating is the right path for you, you will be able to feel it. You'll have that little bit of curiosity and excitement, and you'll know that feeling of, oh, I want to know more about this, or I can't get enough of this, and you'll want to follow it. So that's what I would say to other wayfinders. And it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be coaching and facilitating and integration all in one. I want to make that really clear. Some people are called to that. Some people really are called to be kind of a one-stop shop, aside from referring when it's needed. Some people really enjoy going through the entire journey with their client, but that's not for everybody. Some people just want to do the coaching and hold the space for the conversations that come up before in preparation or afterward in integration. Some people just feel called to facilitate. And there is actually a much deeper discussion that we could have and we will have on the difference between facilitating and guiding. And I would love to talk about what goes into guiding as opposed to or in addition to facilitating, and how we can tap into other forms of wisdom, other forms of knowing that maybe don't necessarily come from your training or from all the books, all the materials that you've studied. There really is something deeper there and more intuitive, I believe, when it comes to guiding. But yeah, just to give people the basics, you have guides, you have facilitators, you have coaches, and sometimes you've got it all wrapped up into one. What would you say about that, Joy?
Well, specifically, since there's only a few states where it's actually legal to guide someone through a medicine journey as a facilitator. There are people who have asked me this question before. We're like, it's not legal in my state. How can I be in this work? And that's when I say you can absolutely be in this work because there are people out there who are going and having their psychedelic journeys with the facilitator, but they didn't have any integration, prep work or integration work. So there's an opportunity to just position yourself as a coach that does maybe microdosing coaching or maybe integration coaching, but it doesn't mean that you have to physically provide or administer the medicine. So I want to make that clear because I've heard so many times from people like, I want to do this work so much, but I'm in a state where I'm afraid and I don't know what to do. And that's when I say, you can absolutely use your wayfinding tools and wayfind your way through a way to connect with people who need support. And that's where I started because even though I was in Florida, at the time, ketamine clinics were popular and people were going there and then having these experiences and having a 30-minute or even 15-minute integration session, which they said was not enough. So I just want to stress that even if you're called to one or the other, but you're in a place where you feel like you're not in an area where it's legal, there are ways for you to be able to support people in this work as well.
And not only that, but we really need you. We need all of us. We really, really do, because, a lot of times we come across people who really want to have a psychedelic experience, but honestly, they're not ready. And this takes a lot of intuition, listening to our body compass to tell whether a client is really prepared for, a psychedelic journey or not. And there are some people who are just not ready to do the deep work, and they're going to need some additional coaching beforehand. If you're a wayfinder, you are familiar with the Martha Beck terms story fondlers and fire fleers. And these are people who are not ready. They're not ready to do the deep work, the transformative work, but they're running away from their problems in two very, very different ways. The story fondlers, the best example I can give for this is the uncle from Napoleon Dynamite, who keeps talking about high school football. He's like this middle-aged uncle who keeps saying, if I had just caught that pass, I would have been all state champion. I'd have been a millionaire by now. My life could have been so much better. And he's so busy fondling his story that he's not taking any action to improve his life. And then on the other hand, we have the fire fleers. And these are the people who are so afraid to sit with their difficult feelings that they just stay busy, busy, busy. A good example of this would be, the man who loses his wife and within days has all of her belongings cleared out of the house, has a new girlfriend within a couple of months, and just generally keeps himself way too busy to feel anything. You would be surprised at how often we come across prospective clients like this who are fire fleers or story fondlers and are just not ready for a big transformative psychedelic experience. And so we need everybody. We need the coaches who are dedicated to helping people open up and start to uh, sit with their pain and begin to process it ahead of time.
Yeah, and there is no magic pill. That's been the biggest misconception. People think, oh, these stories are running rampant in my brain and the patterns. If I just do this medicine, it's going to solve everything and I'm going to come back with this great insight. And that is another important piece is as a coach or facilitator is really letting people know that this can bring up some stuff. It can bring up happy stuff. It can bring up meaningful stuff. And as a coach or facilitator, it can be part of your role to support that and to hold that space. And so it's important as a coach to recognize how much this takes energetically, emotionally, and sometimes physically to support.
Hmm. Yeah. So we now understand, the importance of preparation work, which we'll go into in a forthcoming episode. Um, but now we know that integration is absolutely essential. And we are obviously big fans of the Wayfinder model, but that's not the only way. That's not the only way to do it. Joy, do you want to talk about some different frameworks?
Yeah, so when it comes to integration frameworks, it's actually very few and far between. I mean, from what we've read, and we're still getting research and out there, but one of the frameworks that comes to mind is by Dr. Rosalind Watts. And her ACER model has a number of steps that kind of help a person through the whole experience. I won't go into those. You can look them up online. Um, there's different ways to approach integration as a framework, not just other frameworks, but some schools of thought use the approach to integration through the body, which could be, working on nutrition, reestablishing habits, and so forth, or also working with body work and things like that, acupuncture, Reiki. Um, Other schools of thought think that the framework is to integrate through the mind. Again, these are not frameworks that we're suggesting or proposing. These are just different approaches. There is another one in a great book that we're reading called Consciousness Medicine, but really just talks about the two stages. Clear me on that one. I forget, Sam. It's
Yeah,
not really important.
I actually really love consciousness medicine for preparation work with their holistic model for a balanced life, which is really like a questionnaire, a very in-depth questionnaire to help
Yeah.
assess where a client is at.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, maybe you can talk about yours, but I, kind of have been making my own framework as I've been doing this work. And for me, thinking about parts and people
Hmm.
feeling like there's stuff missing, I came up with the golden wholeness journey as my framework, which just basically gave the client the permission to show up with all of their baggage and then unpack that baggage before going on their journey so they're actually lighter, and then come back after their journey to see where those gaps in their perceived self sense have
Hmm.
filled up or become more light. And so
Hmm.
that's my own interpretation of the framework. Sam, did you have one that you use with clients?
I don't, I mean, golden wholeness, that's incredible. I love that name.
Thank you.
Um, I would say it's a very, very similar philosophy, but for me, the prep work I call getting the lay of the land. Before you go into the medicine portal, it is so important that you have a deep understanding of, you know, what you're working with and what kinds of things might come up. And speaking of IFS, I actually use IFS every single time when it comes to preparation, but also integration. And I want to talk a little bit about how useful IFS can be in psychedelic integration. So if you haven't heard internal family systems or IFS, it's based on a philosophy of personality that says we as a personality, we're not just one part, we're not just one thing. We are actually a multiplicity. We are a whole community of parts. And this is why you can feel in your body and observe in your thoughts that somehow you simultaneously want to wake up early and have a healthy morning routine. And also at the same time, part of you wants to keep pressing the snooze button over and over again. These two parts of you might even be mad at each other. So if you've ever felt at war with yourself, internal family systems explains why. We've all had an experience of feeling split in this way. It's like the cartoons that have an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. The big picture goal of IFS is to build relationships with all of your parts, to show them unconditional love, to see their perspective, to help them feel understood, and then help them heal and release painful beliefs that they've been holding on to for a long time, maybe since childhood or even pre-verbal infanthood. And a lot of this stuff can come up in a psychedelic journey. It's common for people to become very aware of their parts in a very real way during a psychedelic ceremony, or even to have visions of their parts, which I've had before, and it often shows up as something that is very armored up, trying to protect itself. You may see a child locked in a cage. You might find a warrior armored up for battle, or you might find a wild monkey that seems intent on just tearing everything apart. And these are all parts of yourself. So you can see why going in ahead of time and getting the lay of the land is really important. But this can be very confusing for people once they're no longer in the altered medicine state. So having a coach or therapist who's trained in IFS can be extremely helpful for integration work. A coach or therapist like that will be able to skillfully determine what kind of part or parts came up during your journey because there are different types, and they can help you create a safe internal container to help these parts feel safe enough to share their fear and pain and to let go of what no longer serves them. And then beyond that, to take on a new, healthier, and more aligned role in your life. So, this is really powerful stuff. I use it with nearly every client. And yeah, I don't have a nice name for my integration model yet, but IFS is definitely part of it.
Yeah, part. Ha ha ha. Yeah, I think my best work integration wise has come looking at parts that came up to me in the journey. And I really feel like this internal family systems is just amazing for psychedelic integration. They have done some small webinars or master classes on IFS and psychedelics.
Hmm.
Um, and those have been extremely interesting. So, yeah. Um, what else? I think we're going to our discuss in an upcoming episode, get in depth on how to find a facilitator, or a program or a coach.
Hmm.
Um, what else, Sam?
Yeah, so we plan on, putting together an episode. If you're a prospective client looking to have a guided psychedelic experience, we're going to tell you what to look for in a facilitator, a coach, or a therapist. Um, but we also want to let all the prospective facilitators out there, we want to let you know that if this is work that you're considering, whether or not the integration coaching is something that you want to do, we want to just let you know how important it is to have a deep understanding of the importance of integration. And like we said before, you don't have to do it all, but figure out where your interests and your aptitudes lie, and then start building your community. So if the integration piece is missing, partner, please do partner with a coach or therapist who, for them, integration is their jam. The future is community, networks, and cooperation and collaboration.
Yes, it's the back to the mycelial web. It's just
Hmm.
the interconnectedness, and this is bringing us back to the thought of being one and the wholeness and all of that. And so I think we've covered everything on our agenda for today.
Mm.
Sam, you were going to share some free resources that might be helpful
Right.
for people.
Yes. We do believe that accessibility is extremely important, that psychedelic healing should not just be for the wealthy and well-resourced among us. And with that said, I do want to offer a couple of free integration resources. Even if you haven't had a really challenging experience, even if it was a really wonderful, positive experience, I urge you to take the time for integration. Don't let this experience just be a peak thing, this time, this one time you did this thing, or a peak experience you keep chasing over and over again. Let it transform your life. Uh, you can just Google to see if you have a local psychedelic society within driving distance. Oftentimes, psychedelic societies offer free integration circles. And I have to tell you all, there is something magical that happens when you get together and integrate in community. I can't put words to it. It's mystical and wonderful. Um, but if you're looking for a more private experience, I also highly recommend the Fireside Project. And this is a team of volunteers who run a hotline. You can call the hotline. I think they have two separate hotlines. One you can call in the midst of a psychedelic experience if you don't have anyone sitting for you. If you feel unsafe, you can call them and they will stay on the phone with you throughout your experience, help you through it. But they've got another hotline specifically for integration. And all of these volunteers have been trained in integration. I haven't had any personal experience with them, so I cannot speak to the framework that they use. But it is a free resource, perhaps to get you started, and that's called the Fireside Project.
I wish those had been around 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I would have
Hmm.
definitely used that as a free resource because as, someone younger and maybe not as successful as I wanted to be at the time, I would have really appreciated that. And also, just a reminder, we do have a free community on Mighty Networks. You can find us at the psychedelicwayfinder.com, where you can actually get into the group from there. And you'll see some of our upcoming events. We will be starting an integration circle ourselves. So if you feel like you want to be in a Wayfinder-led integration circle, that is in our community. And we'd love to have you because just being a community is such a spectacular thing. We also are starting our first 8-week microdosing program, which is going to be starting on June 3rd. There are still some spots left. Please take a look at our webpage and you can see the landing page for that. But we're so glad that you've joined us and we look forward. If you have comments or suggestions about upcoming podcast topics that you want to hear more about, please let us know. We are open. And as always, it's been nice spending some time with you here in our little container. Sam,
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us. This conversation, if it's lighting you up as much as it's lighting us up, then we're going to change the world.
and come join with us so that we can collectively bring our energies together. We'd love to have you. And there's always resources within our community that are free too. So be well and safe journeys.
Bye.